The transformation.
She developed her eye makeup. She developed the mouth makeup. She created Joan Crawford.
The accusations.
I've never seen Mother lose her cool. She showed her frustration, but not the cruelty.
The legend.
She said to me, you must never go out dressed like sometimes you dress. You must always look your best for your fans.
Joan Crawford, next on Biography.
Crazy about your smile, free and easy style. You're a loving child, got a feeling for you.
Much has been written about Marilyn Monroe's childhood in this town. Joan Crawford's childhood would make Marilyn seem like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm.
She was born Lucille LeSueur in Texas. Her father deserted the family when she was very young.
So the mother was charged with raising this girl and her brother, and she was not very responsible.
I worked my way through St. Agnes Academy, waiting on tables, and then I worked my way through Rockingham Academy from 9 years of age to 13, waiting on tables. I never went beyond the 6th grade. That's one of my hang-ups.
Her ambition was gargantuan. She saw the way to get out of the slums in going into show business. There wasn't much she could do. She couldn't sing very well. She wasn't even much of a dancer. That was the era of the Charleston, and everybody was doing it. And the more movement you made, the more vivacity you got into your performance, the more the audience loved it.
She got a job in Chicago, working in some little nightclub. And then some producer saw her, and she went to New York and got a job in a Schubert musical in the chorus.
I was never good enough to be in the first line of the chorus. The second line of the chorus of Innocent Eyes with Mr. Schubert and Mr. Harry Raff spotted me, so I had tests. And then they just sent me a wire saying you're put under contract to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
This made her come to California, and when she got off the train, there was no one there. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to call. And finally, a young man came up and he said, would you by any chance be Lucille LeSueur? And she said, yes, I am. And he said, oh, well, he said, you know, this man never picks little girls like you. He usually gets tall, glamorous-looking showgirls.
In 1925, when Joan arrived at MGM, it was already a major studio thanks to Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg. A virtual talent factory with a slogan: more stars than there are in heaven. In addition to being used for publicity stills, young hopefuls like Joan Crawford would be given dancing lessons, acting classes, taught to fence and to ride a horse. She was transformed into a full-fledged MGM starlet.
In the beginning, they had no one to do makeup or hair or clothes or anything. I mean, the people in her position at that time had to do as best they could. Her love was dancing, and she thought that if she could get a picture dancing, that she could sell herself. And she used to go down to the Ambassador Hotel when they had dances there. And naturally, being a terrific dancer, she attracted the attention.
She started just as a stock player. Sometimes you would only find her in the back of crowd scenes. Once she played Norma Shearer's back, because Norma Shearer was playing a dual role as a good girl and bad girl. So in the over-the-shoulder shots, it was Crawford's shoulder that was standing in for Norma's double. There were several films which she probably made under the name of Lucille LeSueur.
Louis B. Mayer, hey, it sounds like she's in a sewer. So we got to get a new name for her.
They had a contest in a magazine And the first choice was Joan Arden. And a Joan Arden, an extra girl, sued Metro. So they took second choice, Joan Crawford. And I said, sounds like crawfish. And Billy Haynes, my best friend, said, better crawfish than cranberry. It's served with turkeys. I hope you never make one.
She went to the makeup department, and they gave her a case of makeup, and it was just a trial and error thing with her until she finally arrived at a look that she thought was right.
Her makeup developed from watching other people. She went through a series of different faces. She developed her eye makeup. She developed the mouth makeup. She created Joan Crawford, much like the name was also created.
She appeared in 18 silent pictures in only 3 years. And then 22-year-old Joan Crawford got her big break in Our Dancing Daughters. Her vivacity and energy seemed to embody what was being called the jazz age.
What they showed on the screen was probably wilder and crazier than the reality was, but America wanted to see things in excess, and Joan Crawford was there to give it to them. They put her with some of their very established players whose names were going to carry the picture. Lon Chaney, Charles Ray, John Gilbert, and these increased her box office value, and by the time she finally carried a picture herself, she was a marketable commodity.
In those days, to be a big success in Hollywood, you had to be invited to Pickfair, which was the home of Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. And she was never invited there. But finally, she went to see a play that Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was acting in and liked him very much, went backstage to congratulate him, and they started to see each other. And it was after she and Doug Fairbanks Jr. got married that she was eventually invited to Pickfair.
Joan had crossed the tracks, but she still felt out of place in Hollywood society. So she made her mother-in-law, Mary Pickford, her model for correct social behavior and copied her every move.
Doug Sr. Thought this was very funny. He watched her one day, and so as a joke, when the fish course was served, he picked up a knife and used it, and she was sitting next to him, so she picked up a knife and used it also. And then afterwards she realized she was wrong. She saw Mary picked up a fork. And so she said she was terribly embarrassed. Well, Doug Sr. thought that was very, very funny.
It was the end of the 20s, and everything still seemed possible. A poor girl from the slums could find love with a handsome young actor who also happened to belong to Hollywood's first family.
Like you turned up low, like your knees and low, from your head to toe, got a feeling for you. Did you ever see somebody who...
Joan Crawford, the former Lucille LeSueur, was on her way to stardom, and she was determined that nothing would stop her.
Coming up,
Sadie Thompson is on her way to hell.
playing the seductress makes Joan Crawford a bona fide star.
In 1929, panic not only hit Wall Street, it also struck Hollywood. It came in the form of sound. But for Joan, this was a challenge she took in stride.
I did my first talkie, The Untamed, with Bob Montgomery, and I heard my voice and I said, that's not me, that's a man.
Joan studied great stars like Garbo and Norma Shearer. She learned about camera lenses and the difference that good lighting could make.
When I first started in pictures, Adrian said, I've never seen such big shoulders. She should be the female Johnny Weissmuller. Adrian said, I can't cut her shoulders off, so I'll just exaggerate them. So that's how the padded shoulders came in.
Which turned out to be a dress that she wore on the picture Letty Linton. When that picture was released, I think every manufacturer on 7th Avenue copied that dress.
Joan was very ambitious. Louis B. Mayer was not particularly a pal of hers. She knew she would have to fight for roles. She went after them.
She told me of one incident where she knew there was a script that she was interested in. She went in to Louis B. Mayer's office when he wasn't there and nipped it, took it with her to the ladies' room, and stayed in the ladies' room reading this script, and came out that character and walked into Louis B. Mayer's office and convinced him that she was that character, got the role.
In 1932, Joan appeared in Grand Hotel. It was MGM's brave answer to the Depression. It featured the studio's top stars, and the picture gave Joan's career a big boost.
She only played a secretary, so it was typecasting for her. She usually played the shop girl or the secretary in those years.
Joan was disappointed that she didn't have a chance to act with Greta Garbo, but she did have some key scenes with John Barrymore.
Was she playing something?
Yes, the typewriter.
Oh, you're a little stenographer.
Yes, I'm a little stenographer.
That's fascinating. I don't suppose you'd take some dictation from me sometime, would you? Well, how about some tea, then?
Tea would spoil my dinner. I only have one meal a day, and I'd rather hate to spoil it.
Oh, are you reduced?
Grand Hotel made Joan Crawford a major star.
She wanted to do Rain rather badly. It was the first established great role that she was to attack. The character of Sadie Thompson in Rain had already been played on stage by Gene Eagles and on screen by Gloria Swanson. So she had a lot to live up to when she did this role.
I can speak to my earliest impressions as a little kid going to the Granada Theater in La Jolla, California, population then 4,000. Seeing Joan Crawford on the screen as I did, to me, she was the ultimate seductress.
Now look here.
Hello, lads. Boys, I want you to meet Thompson. Sadie, meet the boys.
Boys.
And this is Mr. Horn.
Mr. Horn, your climate's bum.
Sorry, Sadie, it's the best we got.
Oh, I'm not blaming you. Say, what's this about the delay? How long am I booked for this bird, do you know?
Well, I recall seeing her seducing Reverend Davidson, played by Walter Houston. And if the lady could seduce Reverend Davidson, that was something.
Innocent or guilty, you have got to serve your sentence. It's the only way you can prove you are worthy of mercy.
Oh, no, Mr. Davidson. Your God and me could never be shipmates. And the next time you talk to him, you can tell him this for me, that Sadie Thompson is on her way to hell.
Stop! This has gone far enough.
Oh, no, it hasn't gone far enough. You've been telling me what's wrong with me. Now I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. You keep yelling at me to be punished, to go back and suffer. How do you know what I've suffered? You don't know, you don't care, and you don't even ask, and you call yourself a Christian. Well, you're nothing but a miserable witch burner, that's what you are. You believe in torture.
Thy kingdom come.
You know you're big, and you know you're strong, and got the law on your side, and the power to hang me. All right.
Pay our daily.
But I've got the power to stand here and say, you hang me, and be damned to you.
Feel better?
She started getting into important roles, especially with Clark Gable.
Well, what do you know about that? He can actually smile.
This combination of this manliness of Gable and this perky, independent, bright, electric young woman just made magic on the screen.
Takes years and years of hard work.
Oh, I'm not afraid of work.
Takes guts and brains.
Yeah, I know.
And after you've given everything, maybe something will come of it. Maybe nothing.
Something's got to come of it.
Well, I suppose if you feel you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
You like to dance?
More than anything in the world.
You want to work with me?
Yes, Mr. Gilbert.
Jake.
Yes, sir.
Now beat it.
Thank you. And if I loved you so much it was killing me, and I knew you'd haunt me for the rest of my life, I still wouldn't have any part of you. I only hope they take you back to that prison you belong in.
Well, I think the success of Gable and Crawford was that they were equals.
Supposing I was the guy you were dumb enough to fall for. Then what?
Here's what.
They made, 8 or 10 pictures together, and nearly all of them were hits.
He was a king wherever he went. He earned the title. He walked like one, he behaved like one, and he was the most masculine male I have ever met in my life.
When we return, Joan Crawford paves the way for future single mothers.
She was a pioneer, and it was very difficult for women who were single or divorced to adopt children.
In 1933, after 4 years of marriage to Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Joan sued for divorce.
Well, you double-crossed me, Janie. You're a success. You're marvelous.
Believe now the dancing's my racket, Todd.
2 years later, Joan found love again with highly respected actor Francho Tone.
The Junior League Polo benefit. Nearby are screen stars Barbara Stanwyck, Francho Tone, and Joan Crawford. Joan starts things going.
The marriage was not considered a career move on Joan's part. She was a much greater star than Tone.
In fact, she helped his career by having him co-star with her.
He did an awful lot of things for Joan. He taught her, in fact, he wanted her to go on the stage with him.
He was well-educated. He was a son of a rich family. He was associated with the group theater in New York.
He thought she would be marvelous on the stage. She had stage fright. She could have never worked on the stage.
I remember Francho Tone saying to somebody, part of the reason that their marriage broke up was that he just ran out of adjectives. Every time she came down and they were going out somewhere, she was dressed to the nines. And he had to exalt her and say how gorgeous she looked, how perfectly groomed she was, and what a great dress, and her hair was beautiful, and so forth. He just got tired of that.
Joan Crawford loved going to New York. She loved seeing plays. And when she'd see a play that she felt was right for her, she went to the head of MGM, Irving Thalberg, and she would tell him that she'd love to do this particular play. And before she knew it, Irving Thalberg's wife, Norma Shearer, would be doing the part.
From her earliest years at MGM, Joan had viewed Norma Shearer as her arch rival. But now Joan's pictures were more successful than Norma's at the box office. Teaming Joan with major stars like Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy had helped solidify her standing at the studio.
The importance of the women is that it was the first true villain that Crawford was to play.
Tommy found out I was a homegirl. Homegirl? Get her. Why don't you borrow the quintuplets for thee? Because I'm all the baby he wants, pet.
She wanted to play this role very badly. It was an all-star MGM production. Everybody on the studio was in it, as long as they were female.
Take a good grip on yourself. You're going to die. Stephen Haynes is stepping out on Mary.
L'amour, l'amour. That's French for love. You should have licked that girl where she licked you. In his arms.
Stephen's fed up with you, Crystal. In your heart, you know it.
Take my advice, Crystal. Put your mind on your alimony.
Alimony? With what Stephen can get on you, he won't have to give you a dime.
Here at last in The Women, she had equal co-starring billing with her #1 arch rival, Norma Shearer.
2 years to grow claws, Mother. Jungle Red.
Equaling and surpassing Norma Shearer had been Joan's goal. She had reached the very top, but she had to work even harder to stay there.
You're very confident, aren't you?
Yes.
because I know Stephen couldn't love a girl like you. Well, if he couldn't, he's an awfully good actor.
She was a perfectionist. And I don't think she was ever pleased with anything she ever did. When she did a woman's face, one whole side of her face was disfigured.
Did she? Yes, and now just towards the... There we are. Is that better?
She felt that if it was a good part, that was the important thing. The picture was the important thing.
You couldn't marry me.
Have I asked you to marry me?
Well, no. And you mustn't.
Why not?
Because I want to get married. I've always wanted to get married. I want to have a home and children. I want to go to market and cheat the grocer and fight with the landlord. I want to belong to the human race. I want to belong.
In her personal life, Joan moved to make her happiness complete. Unable to bear a child, she decided to adopt. Christina was the first to be adopted. Then, wanting a boy, Joan went ahead and adopted Christopher.
She was a pioneer in this field because at that time she was not married. And it was very difficult, if not impossible, for women who were single or divorced to adopt children.
Coming up, a new studio and a new role bring Joan newfound respect.
I don't think the public knows what that Oscar means. It is one of the most emotional things that can ever happen to a human being.
Joan Crawford came to the end of her MGM days in a very traumatic way. She had done 2 or 3 real bad flops.
Although Joan had been with the studio 18 years and had appeared in over 50 films, now at age 35, she was considered through. New young would-be stars were waiting in the wings.
And so Crawford was cast adrift. On her last day at the studio, she said goodbye to a few old friends and drove out the auto gate. And nothing was said, no speeches, no gold watch, no flowers even.
Well, I was in good company with Katharine Hepburn and Fred Astaire and a few others. I thought, well, I'm through.
And then Jerry Wald, who was at Warner Brothers, very active and ambitious producer, persuaded Warner to sign Crawford. And they signed her to a long-term contract, I think for half of what her salary had been at Metro. And they submitted various scripts to her, which she turned down. She made up her mind she wasn't going to do any script that they said unless they said her something good. Then finally, the script came for Mildred Pierce.
Well, I think God had his hand on my shoulder because Mr. Mike Curtiz hated me. He wanted Barbara Stanwyck. He wanted no part of me. He said, I don't want those big, broad shoulders. I asked if I could please test. I did the test with Ann Blythe. At the end of the scene, I waited for cut, cut, cut. Nothing, no response from the director. And I looked at him. He was streaming with tears down his face. And he said, I love you, baby. I got the part.
Mildred. Mildred. A name gasped in the night.
You make me feel, oh, I don't know, warm.
And wanted.
World War II was over, and Joan helped bring a new realism to audiences. The result? She was awarded an Oscar for her performance in Mildred Pierce.
You've been snooping around ever since I got this job, trying to find out what it is. And now you know. You know, don't you?
Know what? Know what, Mother?
You knew when you gave that uniform to Lottie that it was mine, didn't you?
Your uniform?
Yes, I'm waiting tables in a downtown restaurant.
My mother, a waitress.
I took the only job I could get so you and your sister could eat and have a place to sleep and some clothes on your backs.
Aren't the pies bad enough? Did you have to degrade us?
Rita, don't talk like that.
I'm really not surprised. You've never spoken of your people, who you came from, so perhaps it's natural. Maybe that's why Father...
Oh, I'm sorry I did that. I'd have rather cut off my hand. I'd never have taken the job if I hadn't wanted to keep us all together.
I don't think the public knows what that Oscar means to us. It is one of the most emotional things that can ever happen to a human being.
Fresh from her Oscar-winning role in Mildred Pierce, Joan commanded a new respect at Warner Brothers and a new and much improved contract.
She wanted anything that was a good picture. Jerry Wall didn't want her to do humoresque because he said, Joan, you're only in the last part of the picture. She said, I don't care. If it's a good picture, she says, and I can play, and I'll play Wally Berry's grandmother.
You don't expect me to believe that, do you?
I don't care what you believe.
I'd like to slap your face.
Why don't you try it?
That might have been the dichotomy about Joan Crawford, that she was very headstrong and ambitious, almost maniacally ambitious. And yet she was very vulnerable. She wanted to be liked.
After the breakup of the marriage with Tone, she felt that the home needed a father and the children needed a father. And she met Philip Terry, who was under contract to MGM, and she felt very comfortable with him. But years later, after she divorced him, she said she made a mistake, and she thought being comfortable was love, but it wasn't.
We were in Sedona, Arizona, and we were working out in 120-degree heat. By that time, she had adopted twins, too, so she had 4 children to talk with. She would listen to all the problems, and finally she'd say, now, you keep a happy face, and you know that Mommy loves you, and I'll call you tomorrow night. Now, put your sister on. This went on for all 4 of these children.
I don't think anybody will truly understand Joan's relationship to her children, why she adopted them. I think she felt as a woman that she wouldn't be fulfilled if she didn't have children.
She was a disciplinarian. She wanted us to grow up independently, self-reliant, and to set our goals to what we believe was right.
She was determined not to let her kids fall into that kind of princess, prince Hollywood syndrome that sadly a lot of famous actors' children had fallen into.
She felt that these children might not have the money to live the kind of life that she lived. And she wanted them to be able to go out and face the world.
We had one cook and we had our governess, but we still had to make our beds and wash our dishes. And I think we were told when we were about 4 or 5 years old, we had to bring our chairs into the kitchen sink and start washing the dishes.
And of course the children resented that because they felt that the servants were there to do that. I was assigned as a costumer on Flamingo Road. I was so thrilled about meeting her. I wondered how she would react to somebody that was a fan, really. I walked in and I said, I'm here to help you today. She said, welcome aboard, and which relaxed me immediately, and I felt I was so fortunate not only to find her still the glamorous star but a very warm and wonderful person to work with.
On the set of the series Night Gallery, then 20-something director Steven Spielberg charmed Joan Crawford by sending a fresh red rose in an empty Pepsi bottle to her dressing room every morning. They remained good friends up until her death.
I have no place in your life, Myra, no proper place.
Without you, I have nothing.
When Joan was cast in Sudden Fear, it was a demanding role that she needed in her career. Joan Crawford was an actress of many different colors. Each role was a step towards something better. She became the character, which many people don't do. She was good with people. People were in awe of her, and she was never in awe of herself.
The fan letters were answered in her own handwriting. She sent out thousands of photographs, hand autographed.
She said to me, never go out. You must never go out dressed like sometimes you dress. You must always look your best for your fans. You never know who you're going to see.
What made her a star was I worked my buns off to get here and I'm not going to lose it. And so therefore, if it meant getting dressed up to go to the market, she'd do it. If it meant giving one more interview to somebody you can't stand, but it's going to help the picture, she would do it. She didn't complain. She was a total pro.
Hollywood, it's given me my education. It's given me everything I've ever earned. The power to adopt children, to raise them, to educate them. I will never be ungrateful for that.
It was my second film. I was a Broadway actor and knew very little about movie acting. Had done one picture, Picnic, returned to New York, and then was called back to do Autumn Leaves with opposite Joan Crawford.
Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song.
Good night.
Good night.
Bert, please don't come back anymore. What? I mean it. Don't come back.
Gibbs, man.
Find a girl your own age.
Here's that woman that seduced Walter Houston when I was a little kid in La Jolla. She was a very directive person and very well organized. And a damn good actress.
You conniving tramp. Now that'll teach you. No more lies. I saw all three of you through the door.
She was able to summon up some very real emotions. If you have a very sad beginning, if you've had a sad life, that's something that actors use very often to summon up an emotion when whatever happened to you that broke your heart. If you can recall that, you can summon up those tears. So I think underneath that very fierce, determined, individualistic, strong Joan was a very sad little girl.
In 1955, Joan married Alfred Steele. He was the chairman of Pepsi-Cola. And in later years, Joan called this her happiest marriage.
He wasn't worried about how he looked, and he wasn't vying for somebody else's part. He wasn't trying to get the limelight away from her. Totally secure in his position in life, as she wanted to be in hers, but was not always.
When Mother married Al Steele, he would go open Pepsi plants all over the United States and Europe. We first went to Switzerland. And we were there twice on our Christmas vacations, one with all 4 of us kids, and we went to St. Moritz. We learned to ice skate.
When Al Steele was CEO, Joan attended meetings, and eventually they pointed her to the board. It got her accustomed to speaking to people, to being on a stage. She was terrified at the very beginning, but fell into the routine of doing it.
I was just starting my 3rd movie, Best of Everything, and Joan Crawford was signed to play the head of the publishing house. And it was unfortunate that she had, that I met her at maybe I consider her weakest point in life, her most vulnerable, her most frail. She had just lost Alfred Steele, who was the, she said at some point, the love of her life. When she would be called to go before the camera, she was scared to death. A couple of times she caught my eye before the take, and I remember just going, you know, you can do it. I think that gave her confidence, certainly when she got it right on camera and had the momentum going and knew her words and knew what she was doing. There was no question that you could see everything that made Joan Crawford a star.
Joan Crawford co-starred with Bette Davis in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And once again, she showed her ability to survive by adapting to new audience tastes, those of the 1960s. With these 2 veteran stars, director Bob Aldrich also had to be a bit of a lion tamer.
Oh, Blanche. You know we got rats in the cellar?
Started to shoot Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Davis came out in that white makeup. Joan was shocked. She couldn't believe what she was looking at. Davis was very nasty to her, and I was there to witness it. Very short with Joan. And Joan was not a fighter. She just did not know how to fight back. And who could fight back with Davis? She had words at her command that Joan could not fathom.
To learn more about Joan Crawford and her family tree, visit genealogy.com.
Joan wanted to continue acting. She even accepted parts in low-budget horror pictures. Work was work.
Joan Crawford's unique achievement? Well, how about the fact that she was a working actress, that she was an entertainer. She always gave 110% in everything that she ever did. There is never a case of you finding a piece of film with Joan Crawford slumming. If you can pull a piece of film out of the vault that's 60 years old and still be dazzled by the vibrancy of the persona and still be entertained by the performance, I don't think she ever expected to give quite that much.
Joan Crawford was a very proud woman. So when sickness did come upon her, she was aging. She could no longer look her best. It was sort of like the legend of the elephants who go away to die. So she holed up in her apartment in New York and just pulled down the curtain.
You'd say, Joan, come and have dinner. Oh, my darling, I'd love to, but I can't. I know she gave away her little dog She let her faithful old mamacita, the maid, go. She seemed to be clearing up her life.
In 1977, at age 71, Joan Crawford died of cancer. A year later, a tell-all book written by her adopted daughter, Christina, was published.
I really wasn't surprised when Christina came out with that dreary, vicious book of hers, Mommy Dearest.
And she wasn't that kind of person that my sister Christina had said. She was very caring and loving.
I think Christine was very, very envious of Joan Crawford and her public and her popularity and her beauty. Very envious. Joan called me on many occasions to help Christine get a job as an actress, which I did on 2 occasions.
Joan did everything possible for that child. She wanted to be an actress. She wanted to be Joan Crawford.
I've never seen Mother lose her cool. She never lost her cool in front of us. I think sometimes she showed her frustration, but not in the cruelty that the book had mentioned. She was a fine woman. She had 2 fine careers, one in an actress and one as a businesswoman, and she never lost control.
The producer was visiting Joan in her apartment in New York. He noticed that there was a little man in a wheelchair there, very aged and infirm and white-haired. She never introduced him until she went to the door with him and said to this producer, well, thank you for coming by. And the producer said, who is that? He said, well, she said, well, that's Francho. Here at the end of both their lives, she had taken in her old husband from 30, 40 years before, was serving him up dinner and trying to cheer him up. And that was another side that most people don't hear about Joan.
Joan's whole life was work hard and be better. Be your best, whatever that was. There may never have been enough security that allowed her to be who she really was, but I applaud her strength. I really do.
I remember her coming out of the club on 52nd Street. Her limousine didn't arrive. She'd always have a small pocket of fans. The doorman said, well, Mrs. Crawford, should I get you a cab? Yes, she said. The cab arrived, she got in the cab, and the first thing she did after the door closed was she turned on the light inside the cab. And then she said to the driver, so that her fans could see almost like the Queen in a carriage going off with the light on in the back. She loved the light. She loved the attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Joan Crawford.
I never knew there was so much love